point is that after his passing, there is nobody like that. So when the Sahaba disagreed, for example, when it came to the stipends, some money that was given to people, the Muslims who had participated in battles in the past, during the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Abu Bakr and Umar disagreed on the stipend amount for the people before Badr and the people after Badr. Because Umar ibn Khattab felt that the people before Badr, before Islam became vast, those people sacrificed more because they took big risks. You know, the Muslims were very weak, and they fought, and they could have died, and he put them away. When Islam became very strong, and then new Muslims came, then Umar ibn Khattab made a distinction between them. Abu Bakr Siddiq said, no, the distinction is going to be made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to give everybody equal. Now this is disagreement. So when it was during the Khilafat of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he did it one way. When Umar al-Khattab became the Khalifa, he changed it. So they disagreed, which is the honest disagreement, because there's no Prophet Muhammad ﷺ there to say this way or that way. So the first thing is that anything after the time of the Prophet ﷺ is mankind prone to injustice, and those injustices happen. If you read about what happened when the Umayyad dynasty collapsed and the Abbasid dynasty took over, and they invited all the leaders of the Umayyad people into a dinner, and they slaughtered all of them. They brought them there and they killed them all because they were worried that they will maybe take over. You know, they will be a threat to them. Same thing with the Prophet ﷺ's family. You know, the Prophet ﷺ's family, like Hassan was saying, and the generations beyond, they are a threat. So it's not surprising that leaders, the Khalifas, if you want to call them, even after the Khulafa Rashidin, those people also, it's not surprising that they went after the Prophet's family and tried to kill them, assassinate them, make some excuse for them. So the point is that many things happened after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And slavery is a part of the things that did happen, but that does not mean that Islam promotes, tolerates, or accepts slavery. And one of the things I want you to keep in your mind, and this is something we emphasize over and over again, is using your mind to understand if something is right and wrong, and then putting it in line with the Quran. Because the Quran doesn't tell you something is right that your mind will say this doesn't make sense. And it will not tell you that something is haram that your mind says, what's wrong with this? It's completely fine. It doesn't work that way. It's with the fitrah of human beings. It brings people back in line with harmony. So just one thing I want you to think about is, if you imagine a slave woman, okay, just to give you that one example, because there's many examples. But if we take the case of a slave woman, and the general position throughout the Muslim world is that it's allowed for a woman who is a slave to, whether she likes it or not, that the master can do anything he wants with her. Now, if you read the Quran, which I encourage everybody to do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a lot of dignity to every person. He even said that if you kill one, it's as if you killed all of humanity. And if you save one, it's as if you saved all of humanity. The point is that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's point of view, every single person is that valuable. He's not talking about the war and who's a mightier person. He said the only difference he makes amongst mankind is the amount of taqwa that they have, the God consciousness they have. So the main thing I want you to recognize is that if you think of a woman who is somehow became a slave, and she prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she has this man that she doesn't like, who's a brutal man, and this religion says that he is allowed to torture her, and it's allowed. So the first, and this is majority majhur opinion, is that this is okay. So if you look past the Prophet's time, you will see that this is okay. And many Khilafah had harems. Harem is not an uncommon thing, and they had these concubines. Now, the reason I'm trying to get you in the mind of this woman is I want you to recognize that every part of you and every part of your reading of the Quran will tell you that there's no way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will abandon anybody and allow them to suffer this kind of indignity. And if you look in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we have to ask, what was the reason for slavery? So in Surah 8 verse 67, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it does not behove a prophet to keep captives unless he has battled strenuously on earth. So first thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, it does not behoove a prophet that he keeps captives, the slaves, unless he is battle strenuous, unless it is in the process of jihad, meaning you have a battle, you capture prisoners, they become slaves. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But the condition of slavery is that you are captured in battle. There is nowhere in the Quran that talks anything about selling and buying slaves. It doesn't exist. It's a post-prophetic innovation. Going to other countries like North Africa, collecting slaves, selling here, selling there, never happened in the process of Islam. Never. So the first thing is that the Quran is saying how can someone come into slavery? It's through battle. Now you may desire the fleeting gains of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you may desire the fleeting gains of this world, but God desires for you the good of the life to come, and God is almighty wise. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that there is a temptation for slavery because you want good in the dunya, you want this free life, you want that. And He's saying that the akhirah is better. Now this is what the Quran says about slavery. Now, in Surah 47 verse 4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, now when you meet in war, those who are bent on denying the truth, smite their necks until you overcome them fully, and then tighten their bonds. You know, tighten their bonds, right? Capture them. But thereafter, okay, so thereafter, set them free either by an act of grace or against ransom, so that the burden of war may be lifted. Thus shall it be, and know that had God so willed, He could indeed punish them Himself. Now, the point is that, now look, the one verse says that you can only take slave in battle. But it doesn't assume that this person will be a slave forever. It says that, and after the battle is over, and you fight, then release them. Better to release them for nothing, or you can release them on a ransom to their families or whoever. Now, this is how slavery comes. But now people say, well, you know, but why do we take slave in the first place? Well, you have to keep in mind it's 1,400 years ago. Okay? 1,400 years ago. We talked about this, the punishment. Remember we talked about the punishment in Islam? And the punishment in Islam, people forget that 1,400 years ago in Arabia, and keep in mind, when the Battle of Badr took place, the Prophet ﷺ had 300 or some people. That's it. We're not talking about grand battles of 100,000 on this. We're talking 300 people, 1,000 people. That's the battle. And they don't have structures. Most of them are nomads. They have mud homes. They don't have bars, places, prisons. They're trying to feed themselves, the people. The wealthy people are the ones who get food. So people who have clothes, they may have one pair of clothes, two pair of clothes. You read about this. It's 1,400 years old. These are luxuries. So at that time, there's no prison. So the punishments that you're going to find, there cannot be a punishment that says put them in prison for 30 days. You have to feed them. You have to first have a structure. You have to feed him. Then you have to take care of his family that is now he's not there to support them. You have to do all of that. And if you do that later, like we can do now, good, alhamdulillah. You're a wealthy country, you can do that. But at that time, it doesn't exist. So the advice or the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be something that's in line with what you can do. He cannot say something about prison when they don't even have prisons. But the same thing comes with slavery. When you have a battle and each side captures prisoners, what do you do with them? If you read, what happens is that the battle is over and the Prophet ﷺ has all these people. They have to feed them, they have to house them. So what he does, he gives them to him, he gives them to this, he distributes them amongst the Muslims. And then he goes a step further. He said, treat them like you treat your own household. You cannot beat them. You cannot hurt them. So he also is taking away any kind of indignities that come with slavery. So on one hand, he has to deal with these prisoners. And so he has to distribute. That's the only way to deal with them. There is no capability to deal with them in any other way. And then he protects them by giving some boundaries as to what you can and can't do with them. And how that you should treat them. So, sorry, I didn't have time to print my notes, so I got to deal with this dumb thing. Keep locking up. So, and this is where you'll never see this idea of concubines. Now, there's in the Quran, now let's talk about concubines, okay? Because some people say, well, you know, the Quran, Allah, well, here's what the Quran says about it. About that woman, you know, the one that I said, your mind should tell you, think of your daughter, think of your wife, think of your, it should tell you there's no way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can allow this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't leave it to chance. He says it in the Quran. He says in Surah 4, verse 25, and as for those of you who, owing to circumstance, are not in a position to marry free believing women, let them marry believing maidens from among those whom you rightfully possess, meaning your slaves. And God knows all about your faith. Each one of you is an issue of the other. So first thing he's saying is to marry them. Okay? Then he goes one step further. And God knows all about your faith. Each one of you is an issue of the other. Meaning, you and the slave, you're all together. You're the same. Each one is an issue of the other. Then he goes and marry them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Then, with their people. He doesn't just marry them. He said, marry them with the permission of their people. So this is a slave, just like a free woman. Marry them with the permission of their people. And give them their dowers in an equitable manner. They being, now it's other side, they being women who give themselves in honest wedlock. Muhsanatin, not in fornication, musafihatin, nor as secret love companions, agdan. So Allah subhanahu is saying that marry them so that they're not prostituting themselves and they're not doing illicit relation. Meaning he's saying that if you have a relation with them outside of marriage, what is it? It is fornication or it's some kind of lewdness. He's saying that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying right here that don't force them into this prostitution. Take them as honest people that they want to be. You see, the Allah is so clear. And when they are married and thereafter become guilty of immoral conduct, they shall be liable to half the penalty to which free women are liable. Why? Because this is, we always talk about human nature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always accounts for human nature. If you have a woman who grows up in a high, noble family, and is taught from here to guard this, guard this, you know, very taught from very early age, they're going to have a certain type of discipline. But if you take that same person and you bring them up in a place, they're growing up in the street and they have nobody teaching them anything, their moral capacity is not going to be the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that this group and this group are not the same. You cannot take this person and punish her like you punish this person. Because this person had the benefit of what they were taught. And they had this nobility about them, this dignity about them. And on this side, you got somebody that has lost their dignity due to their circumstance. Again, always accounting for human nature. But it's for your own good to persevere in patience. And not so, in the end, it just says that it's better actually, if you can't afford to marry a free believing woman, it's saying, and you can't help yourself to marry from the slave women, but it says that, you know what, the best thing is just don't get married. Just don't get married. If that would be the best for you. So, in closing on this section on slavery, these 3 verses essentially deal with the only injunctions that you'll find in the Quran as it comes to slavery. Now, if you go after the Prophet's life, you will certainly find many fatwas that allow for these kind of indecent relationships. And if it bothers you, what I'm saying is to you what the Quran says. And we can't change the history. But as it comes to us individually about our iman, our faith, what do we think about our religion, what our religion says, and why it says what it says, then at least we can be comfortable that individual dignity is very, very central to Islam and is protected as far as the Quran and the Prophet. Alright.
Brother Masood, only because it's streaming, can you just clarify what you said before in regards to those fatwas? Since you mentioned that there are fatwas that came after the death of the Prophet, but then also
so the majority
the validity of in terms of for making decisions or for us following them.
Oh, about fatwas.
Like their opinions.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
So one of the things we covered in a prior session is that a fatwa, by definition, because a fatwa carries a lot of weight in the minds of Muslims, but we have to keep in mind what is a fatwa. A fatwa is just an opinion of a scholar about something that the Quran and Sunnah is not clear. If the Quran and Sunnah is clear, then you don't need a fatwa. That's why you don't need a fatwa for don't eat pork and don't drink alcohol or don't have illicit relations. You don't need fatwa for that. Because Allah SWT says that. But if the Quran and Sunnah is not clear on something, there is no explicit position on it, then scholars go through a lot of techniques in usul al-fiqh, like they have qiyas, and they have istihsan, or they have sad al-darai. These principles, while they may make some sense, they are man-made principles, and the results are man-made conclusions. And no one should be surprised that the Hanafi school does their ijtihad, they use their reasoning, and they come to one decision that is haram, and the Shafi'i school comes to another decision that is haram. It shouldn't be surprising, because if the Quran and Sunnah are not clear, then you're going to have a difference of opinion. So fatwa, ultimately, keep in mind, is just an opinion of somebody. And so you see whose opinion it is, but it's just an opinion. It doesn't carry any legal weight. And that's why, actually, in the Hanafi school, they're a little bit more careful. They don't even use the term fard when something comes not from the Quran. Even if it comes from hadith, Sahih hadith, they will not say fard. They will say, anybody know? Wajib. They will say wajib. They will never say fard to anything that is not in the Quran. Now, the other schools, which are more like Ahl al-Hadith schools, that are very adamant on hadith, they understand the difference, but in practice, they don't differentiate. But a key thing to remember is that all schools and all learned scholarship says that anything that's not from the Quran, anything that comes from hadith, is not what they call qat'i sabut. It's not a definitive evidence. There's no disagreement. Even those in the Ahl al-Hadith will say that anything from hadith is not definitive. It could be wrong, so we will call it a dhanni sabut. It's a speculative proof. And if it comes from Quran, it's qat'i sabut, it's definitive proof. They say that because they acknowledge that there can be an issue when it comes to the hadith, no matter how authentic it is, versus the Quran. This is unanimous, and that's why Aqidah will never come. The fundamental faith, the beliefs that we have in books and angels and the prophets, these things only have to come from Quran. No Aqidah from any school comes from hadith.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
Dealing with the slaves, would they raise in dignity like if you was to free a slave and then marry a slave?
Well, actually, that's a good point.
Or like you free a slave, then you marry it, or you marry the slave. Would that, how would you deal with that slave? Would it still be like certain boundaries.
No. Well, first of all, if you marry a slave, she's free.
Automatic.
That's automatic. That's automatic. And so that everybody agrees to that. There are some things that people disagree on because, again, this area of slavery, other than what the Quran says, is all just people making it up. Okay? So I'll give you an example. You'll read in many books, especially when people try to defend slavery in Islam. Are we okay?
I want to make sure you stay to us.
Yeah. So, what time is it? 38. So what time do we finish now?
It changed a little bit.
40. So I think, but the prayer is later today, right?
6 to 10.
Is at 10? So we'll have a little bit more time to maybe 10 minutes. We'll walk on. Okay, sure. So for example, many people who try to defend slavery, they say, well, you know, if you become a Muslim, you become free. Well, you say if you become Muslim, you become free, but history shows that people were Muslim and they were slaves. So how do you explain that? I mean, only if someone who doesn't look is going to believe that. So they say to non-Muslim people in the audience, well, you know, if you become Muslim, you become free. And I don't even think that's a good thing, because now you're becoming a Muslim to become free. Does that make any sense? Yeah, la ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion. So you're not going to give an incentive to freedom to become. But more so, the Quran says, marry the believing the women who are slaves, right? So it's assuming a situation in which there's a slave and they're Muslim. Because the slavery, as you look at the way the Quran is talking about, it's not a slavery of subjugation, it's a slavery of taking care of the people. These people need to be taken care of, so they get distributed amongst these people. Like Zayd ibn Haritha, you know, who was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, was his slave. And he loved the Prophet ﷺ because he raised him, you know. And so, then when his parents found him, he gave him the Prophet said, you can go with your parents, you can stay with me. He chose to stay with the Prophet. And he comforted the parents, you know, the father and the uncle, he comforted them that he's okay. And when they saw the Prophet, they were comforted by that. So, you know, Islam is full of, like, if you do certain sin, you free a slave. You know, the whole system is built to get rid of slavery. The whole system is built to get. There's not any major sin that you're going to find in which freeing a slave is not one of the ways to absolve your sin. So if you have a system that says I can only take slaves when in battle, and that after battle I need to return them to their people, and then I have here all these situations in which slaves should be free out of your generosity, then how is slavery going to survive? In 100 years it should be gone. But after the Prophet ﷺ, the temptation to enslave people is going to be there.
Just take one.
So, okay, next thing is mushrikeen. Mushrikeen is those who attribute partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People talk very harshly about it, but I want you to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about mushrikeen. And if any of those who ascribe divinity to all beside God, meaning if any of those mushrikeen seek thy protection, grant him protection, so that he might be able to hear a word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thereupon convey him to a place where he can feel secure. This because they may be people who sin only because they do not know the truth. So this is now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about mushrikeen, which in the general Muslim mind we have this harsh attitude. And yet you have the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have this completely soft attitude. And He even makes excuse for them that they may be mushrikeen because they don't know any better. And He also said, you know, bring them in so that it kind of softens them, so they can listen. And they can be free. So, yeah.
I have a question regarding slavery. We saw the one side of the story where people were freed from slavery because they were married. They got married. So, but what about those male slave would they be?
Well, no, it says after the battle that you should free them. And he said you should free them at no cost. It says in the Quran right here. I am better, no better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, but thereafter set them free, either by an act of grace, do it for free, or against ransom. And the ransom can be, they can work off the ransom, they can, but that's what it says. That the vision is after the battle, you free them. That's the vision. People can make all the excuses, and we know people are very good at making excuses when it comes to monetary situations, just like they are today. Okay, everybody's really good, all the fatwa comes about, when it comes to money, it's funny, the mufti changes his ruling, and you find out, maybe he got a new house or something. You guys think it doesn't exist? It exists. That's the reality that we live. So, it's not surprising that the very powerful Khalifas who are corrupt in the later part, after the Khulafa al-Rashideen, it's not, they want a harem. So they get the fatwas from these scholars. And if they don't give the fatwa, the poor scholar will get his head chopped off. They're chopping off the head of their own brothers and their own cousins so that they can keep power. What's it to chop off this scholar and this scholar? It's not a big deal. So they get the ruling that they want, and we're not unique. This is human history, whether it's Muslims or Christians or Jews or any other. This is human nature. And Muslims are not immune from human nature. Not at all. So, regarding the mushrikeen, that was...
How are you defining mushrikeen?
Mushrikeen is those who associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those are what mushrikeen.
And in this context, were they the idol worshippers?
Yeah, the idol worshippers. In this time, it was talking about essentially the people of Makkah, who are mushrikeen. That was the dominant religion in Makkah.
Now it's like worshiping TV and stuff like
It could be anything. Yeah, it could be. Worshiping TV is a little bit like, that's an exaggeration because the Quran is not talking about that. Definitely you can extend that the harm that comes from worshiping other gods, you can extend that not as a mushrikeen. You can't say the guy who's watching too much TV is mushrikeen or he's doing shirk. No, of course not. But you can say that the harm that comes from doing shirk, some of that harm can come from being enslaved to anything.
Like taking your desires as your God.
Exactly, taking your desires as your God. So many scholars have talked about it in that sense, but we have to be clear when the Quran is talking about the mushrikeen and their condition, it's talking about a people that are giving godly authority to something other than God. And I think we can close on this because 3 minutes will finish at 9:50. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do you ever think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran over and over again about Tawheed, right? Belief in one God. And I used to think, how many times you got to say believe in one God? Because if you say it once, you said it. If you say it twice, you said it. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep repeating it? Over and over and over again. Why does he keep repeating the same thing, That there's only one God and don't attribute partners to him. And he does it on every page you will find this message. And what we do know is that there must be a reason. But he's not doing it by accident. He's got a reason. And if you think about it, if we think hard enough and we understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us any guidance. Because he says, if all the world denied me, it would not diminish me. Meaning, his point there is that your worshiping him is not for his benefit. It's for your benefit. And your believing in one God is not for his benefit, it's for your benefit. And your attributing partners to him is not a harm to him, it's a harm to you. And when he repeats this concept throughout the Quran, he's talking about that this must be a severe harm that will come to you in this dunya. And there will be, if you believe in one God, the benefits will be intense, it will be massive, it will be not small. That's why he repeats it. That's why in Makkah for 13 years, his primary message was Tawheed. And this is where you can talk about extending, like, this is where, like, what are you worshiping? Are you worshiping money? Are you worshiping people? Are you worshiping a rabbi or a priest or a monk or even a sheikh? If you're worshiping them, then you will be susceptible to them, right? You can be a victim of them. And if you go back to, like, where my family originated from India, for example, and I visited there, it is not uncommon that these Maulanas are perpetrators of abuse.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
So, anyways, we'll end here, but I think we've covered the slavery. Typically, we don't do question and answer. We had a little bit more time, and I wanted to allow it for this setting because, of course, this is something that's a little bit beyond our typical program in which we're just covering the verses. And there are a couple of subjects maybe that we'll do like that, but we're not going to make it a habit. But I think we've covered it enough for you to want to investigate it and look into it and think about it. But at least you should have some comfort that as far as Islam is concerned, its position is going to be very much in line with your mind and your heart. Jazakallah khairan.